Have you ever looked at your life and realized you're no longer the man in control? One day you wake up and everything feels upside down. You're the one making her coffee at 6 a.m., rehearsing in your head how to politely ask for a few hours to play golf. You used to be decisive. You used to call the shots, plan the dates, and lead the way. Now, every choice feels like a negotiation. Every word feels like it needs permission. This is the silent struggle most men never talk about. On the surface, the relationship looks fine. You look like the caring partner, the dependable boyfriend, the good guy. But inside, you feel drained. You feel like a passenger in your own life. The harder you try to make her happy, the less happy both of you seem to become. And deep down, you know something is off, but you can't quite explain why. Here's the hard truth. This is not bad luck. It's not a one-off mistake. It's a trap, a psychological trap that swallows millions of men in modern relationships. And the worst part? It doesn't kill love overnight. It kills it slowly, through small compromises, through harmless concessions, until one day you realize you've lost her respect, her attraction, and maybe even yourself. In this video, I'm going to expose that trap. Why it happens, how it destroys even good relationships, and what you must do to escape before it's too late. Stay with me until the end, because if you don't understand this, you'll repeat the same pattern again and again. The shift never happens overnight. No man wakes up one morning and decides, "I'll give up my leadership today." It creeps in slowly, disguised as harmless choices. At first, it feels like compromise, the kind of thing every healthy couple does. You skip a night out with your friends to join her at a dinner party. You stop picking the restaurants because she seems to know better places. You phrase your ideas as questions. Would you be okay with this? Instead of confident statements. None of it feels dramatic. But piece by piece, you hand over the wheel. What starts as small concessions builds into a pattern that rewires the relationship. You think you're being thoughtful, but what you're really doing is stepping out of the driver's seat. The problem is, wait, once you're no longer steering, she doesn't feel like she's on a ride she wants to be on. You go from the man she was excited to follow to the man who follows her around, trying to predict what will keep her calm, what will win her approval. And here's the irony. What you think of as being a good partner often feels to her like dead weight. This is the hidden cost of modern relationships that nobody talks about. Men are taught that equality means giving up authority, sharing of every decision, keeping everything 50-50. It sounds progressive, it sounds fair, but it ignores how attraction actually works. Because when you trade leadership for constant approval seeking, both people lose. She ends up with responsibility she never wanted, and you end up with submission you cannot sustain. Each step makes sense in isolation. She picks the dinner spot because of her diet. She runs the social calendar because she's better at it. She handles the house because she cares more about the design. Logical choices, right? But add them up, and suddenly, you're not leading anymore. You're managing her moods, asking permission for things that should be yours to decide, living a life that doesn't feel like your own. The result is what I call silent dissatisfaction. She feels burdened, constantly disappointed that you don't take initiative. You feel drained, emasculated, but also guilty for resenting her control. And together, you drift into a version of equality that looks stable from the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. You're no longer partners creating a spark. You've become business managers, running logistics while the chemistry fades. If any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with me. Because in the next few minutes, I'll break down exactly why this happens and how you can escape it before it's too late. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the steps. So how does a man lose his leadership in love? It usually happens down one of two roads. Some men surrender it right from the start. Others begin with strength, but slowly bleed it away over time. The destination is the same, a relationship where she holds the power and he spends his days guessing how to keep her satisfied. The first road is immediate surrender. It's the man who thinks his only shot at winning a woman's affection is to be endlessly accommodating. He treats leadership like a liability, so he compensates with over-the-top flexibility. He lets her pick, decide, and control, believing this will set him apart from other men. In the short term, it sometimes works. He gets access to women who might not have noticed him otherwise. But the foundation of the bond is built on compliance, not character. He isn't loved for who he is, but for how quickly he bends. That kind of love has an expiration date. The second road is slower, but far more common. It's the man who starts off leading, planning dates, taking charge. Exactly the qualities that drew her in. Then, as he gets more emotionally invested, he starts trading his leadership for peace. He skips a guy's night to join her plans. He lets her calendar dictate their weekends. He defers to her group of friends instead of introducing his own. Each choice seems harmless, even noble. But together, they carve away his authority until one day he looks back and can't remember the last time he made a decision without her approval. This is where things become dangerous. Because the more he invests emotionally, the more he convinces himself that sacrifice will make her stay. He thinks by proving his devotion, by softening his edges, he'll strengthen the bond. In reality, he's building a trap for himself. I call it the emotional investment trap, the place where love turns into fear. Fear of losing her, fear of rocking the boat, fear of showing up as his true self. And fear changes everything. It shifts a man from leading with confidence to managing with caution. It turns bold choices into constant second-guessing. And worst of all, it erodes the very attraction that brought them together in the first place. Once a man falls into the emotional investment trap, the dynamic shifts in ways he often doesn't see until it is too late. The more he fears losing her, the more he starts optimizing for comfort in the moment instead of health in the long run. He stops asking himself, "What do I want?" and begins asking, "What will keep her happy?" This is where he trades authenticity for safety, not realizing that safety is exactly what kills the spark. The tragedy is that this trap feels rational. Society tells men that commitment means proving devotion, that the more you show how much you care, the more valuable you become. But love does not work that way. Instead, his overinvestment sets off a dangerous feedback loop. The more he gives, the less she feels drawn to him. The more he bends, the less she respects him. And the less she respects him, the more he bends, hoping he can win back what he is actually eroding. This pattern almost always escalates through small requests that appear harmless at first. She asks him to change dinner plans because she is not in the mood for what he suggested. She asks him to adjust his weekend to join her friend's birthday. She asks him to skip the gym so they can have more time together. None of these are unreasonable in isolation. In fact, they look like normal relationship compromises. But every yes teaches her something, and it teaches him something too. She learns that his boundaries are flexible. He learns that saying no brings conflict, while saying yes buys peace. Over time, the requests grow. What starts with choosing restaurants evolves into expectations about how he spends his free time, who he sees, even how he lives. And the more he adjusts, the less of himself remains. Eventually, he finds his entire life running on her approval. He no longer chooses freely. He predicts her moods and navigates her reactions. The cost is enormous. She loses respect. He loses himself. And together they lose the attraction that once held everything together. When a man reaches this stage, his entire decision-making process starts to change. Instead of acting from his own desires, he runs every choice through a filter of fear. I call this the fear-based decision matrix. It's like a mental algorithm constantly calculating her likely reaction, the potential conflict, the energy it will take to calm her down, and whether it's worth the cost. Before he decides anything, whether to see his friends, hit the gym, or even take a night to himself, he first predicts how she will feel about it. His life is no longer guided by what excites him, but by what avoids upsetting her. At first, he may not notice how damaging this is. It feels like he is being careful, considerate, even mature. But over time, this way of living strips him of his identity. He stops asking what he wants altogether. He only asks, what will she allow? The more he practices this kind of calculation, the more natural it becomes, until his own instincts go silent. And that silence is deadly, because attraction depends on authenticity. When he loses his ability to stand firm in who he is, she loses the respect that drew her to him in the first place. This fear-based living creates two destructive outcomes. The first is learned helplessness. He convinces himself that every authentic choice will inevitably cause conflict, so he stops making choices altogether. The second is decision paralysis. Even simple things, choosing a restaurant, planning a weekend, deciding how to spend an evening, become exhausting negotiations. What should be light and easy turns into a stressful puzzle he can never solve. The irony is that in trying to create peace, he destroys it. In trying to avoid conflict, he creates resentment. She ends up with a man she cannot trust to lead, and he ends up with a life that feels foreign to his own nature. And in that gap, between who he is and who he pretends to be, the relationship quietly suffocates. If this breakdown already feels like looking in a mirror, don't ignore it. Hit subscribe right now, because the next part will show you exactly how to rebuild your frame and restore the respect you've been losing. Here's where it gets truly counterintuitive. The very behaviors men believe will make women love them more are often the exact ones that drive women away. The more he accommodates, the more he asks permission, the more he sacrifices his preferences for hers, the more she begins to lose attraction. I call this the authenticity paradox. He thinks he's becoming a better partner, but in reality, he's becoming a weaker one. Think about it. What draws a woman in at the beginning? It's his decisiveness, his confidence, his independence. Those qualities signal strength, competence, and the ability to handle life. But once he falls into the trap of overinvestment, he abandons these very qualities. He stops leading and starts managing. He stops being bold and starts being careful. And while he believes this will deepen the bond, it only erodes the foundation. Every time he bends to avoid tension, he sends the message that her approval matters more than his integrity. This erosion is what I call attraction decay. Over time, she notices that the man who once made decisions with ease now constantly seeks her input. The man who carried himself with quiet confidence now second-guesses every move. The man who had his own passions and boundaries now shapes himself around her moods. To her, it feels like she's losing the man she first admired. To him, it feels like he's doing everything right, yet still being punished for it. The cruel part of this paradox is that it punishes good intentions. He isn't trying to manipulate her. He's not trying to be weak. He's genuinely trying to be kind, thoughtful, and attentive. But kindness without boundaries comes across as neediness. Thoughtfulness without strength comes across as insecurity. And attentiveness without independence comes across as dependence. Over time, she stops respecting him, even if she can't explain why. The truth is, attraction has never been about how well you cater to someone's every want. It has always been about how well you hold on to yourself while inviting them into your world. Leadership and authenticity are the engines of desire. The moment he trades them for constant accommodation, the fire that once made the relationship magnetic starts to die. So how does a man escape this paradox? The answer is not to become cold, controlling, or dismissive. The answer is to reclaim what should never have been surrendered: his authenticity and his authority. I call this the maintenance methodology, a simple but powerful framework to preserve attraction, respect, and balance as relationships evolve. Because without a structure, every man eventually drifts toward accommodation. And once that drift begins, it's only a matter of time before attraction erodes. The first principle is learning to assert your preferences without apology. When you stop always deferring and begin saying what you actually want, you remind both yourself and her that your voice matters. It doesn't mean you never compromise. It means compromise comes from strength, not fear. The second principle is emotional non-management. Too many men make the mistake of trying to regulate her feelings, as if it's their job to prevent disappointment or frustration. It isn't. A healthy woman doesn't want a man who tiptoes around her moods. She wants a man strong enough to let her feel what she feels without losing his ground. The third principle is maintaining independence in key areas of life. Your friendships, your passions, your goals. These are not up for constant negotiation. They are part of your identity, and the more you protect them, the more attractive you remain. Finally, there's the principle of early intervention. Boundaries are easiest to defend when they're small. If you wait until the pattern is deeply rooted, breaking it feels like breaking the relationship. Underlying all of this is a concept I call consensual authority. Real leadership in love is never about force. It's about one partner stepping into the role of direction, while the other willingly supports that leadership. When it's chosen freely, not imposed, it creates safety for both people. She feels secure enough to relax into her femininity. He feels respected enough to lead with generosity. That is when attraction thrives, not in an endless equality of decision-making, but in complementary roles that feed each other's deepest needs. Reclaiming leadership in a relationship is not a single bold move. It is a process, one that unfolds step by step. The first step is recognition. A man must face the truth about how much of himself he has sacrificed. This can sting. It means admitting that the easy peace he bought with endless compromise has cost him respect, attraction, and his own identity. But honesty is the starting point. Without it, nothing changes. Once recognition is in place, the next stage is testing. This is where he begins to assert himself again, not with grand gestures, but with small, steady actions. He chooses a restaurant without asking. He keeps his workout schedule even when it clashes with her mood. He makes weekend plans that reflect his desires. These small tests rebuild the muscle of authenticity. Just as important, they reveal the truth. Often, her reaction is not as explosive as his fear predicted. And even if she resists, standing firm teaches her something. His boundaries are real this time. That resistance phase is unavoidable. When patterns shift, pressure always rises. She may test him harder. She may push back with emotion. The temptation is to cave, to slide back into old habits for the sake of peace. But this is where consistency matters most. If he holds steady, the storm passes. If he wavers, the cycle repeats. Eventually, resistance gives way to stabilization. She begins to see that the change is not temporary, it is permanent. With that realization comes a shift in her energy. Respect grows back. Attraction returns. The man she once admired re-emerges. And when this new foundation is proven reliable, both partners settle into integration, where the relationship runs smoothly again. The roles are clear, the spark is alive, and both feel safer and more fulfilled than before. Recovery is not instant, but when a man stays the course, the reward is worth it. He doesn't just win back her respect, he wins back himself. At the end of the day, the real enemy of modern relationships is not a lack of love. It is not miscommunication. It is not even incompatibility. The real enemy is erosion, the slow, invisible wearing down of the natural dynamics that once made the relationship magnetic. Men step into the trap, believing that more compromise, more accommodation, and more emotional sacrifice will create security. Instead, it creates fragility. It kills attraction quietly, one small yes at a time. But here's the good news. The trap is not a life sentence. The moment a man recognizes the pattern, he can change it. By reclaiming leadership, he does more than restore her respect. He restores the spark that first brought them together. Women do not lose attraction because men care too much. They lose attraction because men abandon the very qualities that made them compelling in the first place. Confidence, decisiveness, the courage to say, "This is who I am, and this is where I'm going." A thriving relationship does not require a man to erase himself. It requires him to remain fully himself while inviting her to join his world. That is the paradox most men never understand. The more authentic he becomes, the more magnetic he becomes. The more he stands firm in his own frame, the safer she feels to relax into hers. And when both people lean into their natural strengths, the relationship transforms. It stops feeling like a business partnership managing logistics. It becomes what it was always meant to be, a passionate bond built on respect, attraction, and shared direction. So if you see yourself in this story, take it as a wake-up call. Stop trading authenticity for approval. Stop making fear-based decisions, and start leading again, not with control, but with confidence. Because in the end, the most successful relationships are the ones where a man never gives up his leadership, and a woman freely chooses to follow it. That is when love feels alive. That is when respect and attraction last. And that is when both partners finally get what they were searching for all along. Thank you for watching. If this message hit you, don't just scroll away. Subscribe, dive deeper into our content, and start building the mindset that puts you back in control. Drop a comment below. What's the biggest struggle you want us to break down next? Let's build a brotherhood of men who rise above confusion and reclaim their power. See you in the next video.